Hello, everyone. Welcome to Limbo. My name is João, and today I want to share a conversation I had a couple of months ago with Jess. So, Jess is part of a community on Twitter called TPOT. That stands for this part of Twitter. And to me, she's like this sage woman that basically runs the community. Uh, and I've met her a couple of times in person. She's amazing. I really, really enjoy her vibe. And when I was looking at guests for the show, I knew that I wanted to talk with Jess. And we covered so many different things. We go from, Teapot and a little bit of history around that community. We talk about her search for meaning and the release of her, religious background into atheism, into trying to find God in the little things, into Buddhism, Christianity. We talk about all of that in her journey, searching for that, which is amazing. We talk about hosting events, like Jess is an expert on that, and we talk about all of the different events that she has hosted, from some sexy parties until like these larger gatherings. So if you want to know like fire hazard stuff and how to like run a tight ship when it comes to events, you really want to watch this part of the episode. And then of course we also go into her Twitter handle, which I still can't pronounce, but Jess does and explains the background. So just that's also very interesting, I think. But yeah, and finally, in the last part of the conversation, we go into polyamorous relationships and how to navigate that and how to build communication and respect in a relationship, which was phenomenal. So I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed too. Just a quick note: Jess is actually part of a project that we didn't get that much into in the conversation, but that project is called Chaleira, which is teapot in Portuguese. And Chaleira basically is trying to gather all of these different ideas and gather all of these different articles for that community for from Teapot. And so I'm going to leave all of their links in the description. Make sure that you go follow and support them in any way. Jess is doing an amazing job with it, and she deserves all of the love and care that you guys have for her. Okay, that's it. Quick note for our sponsors: the socraticexperience.com, the school where I work in, where we help students develop their different skills through dialogue and the Socratic method. You can check us out at socraticexperience.com. And of course, Limbo, the restaurant that was at the origin of this podcast name in Lisbon. Search for Limbo Restaurant Lisbon and you'll find it out. That being said, I hope you guys enjoy this podcast and this conversation with me with Jess. Hi everyone, welcome to Limbo. My name is João, and today with me I have Jess. Jess, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I want to start with the question. I think I've asked you this actually the first time that we met in a local cafe in Portugal, in Lisbon. But it is, can you explain to me the meaning behind your Twitter handle, frideswyth?
Oh, yeah, frideswyth. Yeah. So she's the patron saint of Oxford, the city of Oxford. And her like body, I guess, her relics are kept in one of the colleges there. So Oxford is obviously famous for its university, but I think what is not obvious is that the Oxford University and Cambridge are a little bit different to usual. They have multiple what's called colleges. So you both sleep there, but you might also study there and have teachers there. So it's kind of divided up into these buildings. So anyway, some are older than others, and some are the extension of others. So yeah, her relics are in Christchurch College, I believe. So yeah, she's a patron saint, and I needed to change my Twitter handle. I just wanted to like start fresh.
Yeah.
I was visiting, and yeah, like it's great to look her up. So her name is actually either frideswyth or frideswyth.
Mm,
So you either do a double D or a double TH. And that's because her name is actually in Old English and it uses a letter that we don't use anymore.
oh
And the
wow.
letter is called a thorn.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's like it looks like a B or a P. You know how a B or a P has like the bump? It has a
Mm-hmm.
stick and a bump.
Mm-hmm.
So a thorn, the bump is actually halfway up
Oh, okay.
the stick.
Interesting.
So, yeah, and it more or less is the sound like the like
Duh.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course we use th for that now.
Yeah.
But it's slightly harder than a th, so
Yeah.
that's why you might use a d for it as well. Anyway, both of those spellings were taken, of course. So I made up my I made up my own spelling. So there's a D in the first part, a TH in the second part, and
Yeah.
I also substituted one of the I's with a Y. So anyway, Frideswyth, that's her name.
But like,
Worth checking out. I love her story.
can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I feel like there's a gazillion Patreon saints. Like, why this one?
Right, right. So I really like old Christian stuff. Like the older
Okay.
the better. Like the closer to Jesus the better. I don't know
Hmm.
why. And the UK has like a sort of pretty old history of it, like pilgrims both going from here and then going to Jerusalem, coming back,
Hmm.
and people coming and spreading the word as well. There's even a legend that Jesus came here. I don't think that's true, but anyway,
I had no
it's
idea.
cool. Yeah, I've started enjoying old Christian stuff. So at the time, this was one of the oldest stories I heard.
Got it.
So she was a princess of, yeah, the daughter of like a local tribes guy. Like it was a big deal tribe because there was no king at the time. It was just like 10 or so tribes.
Hmm.
Anyway, this one was a big one, and she was a princess. Somebody wanted to marry her. She didn't want to marry him. So she ran away into the forest for like months, like 2, 3 months, which I think is very impressive just by itself. Like if you're a
Yeah.
princess,
And
then that's
you
a big deal. And just she
absolutely.
just like ran away and like ate leaves or something. I don't know. Like so
Yeah.
yeah, she really didn't want to marry this guy. So anyway, her father eventually is like, fine, clearly you don't want to marry him. So I'll let you become a nun, which is yeah, what you did with women that didn't want to get married. But he was a prince. Sorry, he was a king. So he actually built an abbey for her, and she became the abbess. So she
Mm.
was the head of this abbey, and she was that for ages. She really enjoyed it, I guess, because she was there the whole time. And then to be a saint, you have to do miracles.
Yeah.
So the couple of miracles that she did was like many years later, when her father was dead, another man came and tried to marry her again. And so she was like, I don't want this. Anyway, the legend is that he was struck blind. So he literally couldn't see to find her and he went away. So that's
Okay.
cool. But she also did run away from the abbey
Yeah.
to be like hidden. So she went to another place, and it was really far away from the river where they were getting their water. So
Mm.
Oxford is on the River Thames, and it's called Oxford because it's the shallow place in the river where you will take your oxen across the river. So a ford
Oh,
is a place where you can cross the river where it's very shallow.
interesting. I had no
So
idea.
she was ended up, yeah, that's what Oxford means. So she ended up far away, and it was a long journey to get water. So she prayed to God, asking for a source of water that was much nearer to her new place of residence. And so a spring magically bubbled up from the ground at her feet, and that is still there in this like little village. And so that was her second miracle, and so then she was sainted for that. And she ended up
Wow.
going back to the abbey, I believe, and they've kept her relics in the church. So that's her
Awesome.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So, okay, so I was saying this before. I think that's a segue for like the whole relationship with spirituality and with like these I don't know, weird phenomena. Let's call it that. It's a good transition for teapot basically. And
Okay.
I believe so. So first of all, okay, when I told you this before we started, but when um when I actually went on Twitter, like I had no idea. I haven't met anyone, and I think I told this in a previous episode where I went on Twitter in a moment where everyone is complaining that internet and social media were awful, and I was having a blast because I was meeting all of these new people. They were amazing. I was like, that's a skill issue. Like I'm having like the time of my life. And then suddenly,
Yeah.
everywhere that I looked, like people kept referring like this teapot, and I was like, "What the hell is a teapot?" Like I know what a teapot is, but like, what does this mean? And so
Yeah.
eventually, and for the longest time, I really thought that it was like some kind of like club where people had teapots or something like that. And then
Okay.
eventually, someone actually wrote down, "No, it's this part of Twitter," and I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." And so when I follow a couple of people, and quickly all of them like eventually got led me to your account, And I was telling this before, where I feel like if, like in Teapot, you might not be the person with the biggest following or something like that, but you're basically like that old sage woman in the background. When there's a question about like the community, everyone just turns around slowly and looks at you to see what you need to say. And so
Wow.
I think that this would be an amazing. Like I want to pick your brain about this, and so I guess that the first question is for people that have no idea what we're talking about, like what teapot means or what this is. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how did it emerge?
Sure. Well, I think the current name is only the current name, and I think that's fair because Twitter is amazing. It's everyone to everyone, right? It's an all to all network. That's one of the reasons why it's unique compared to, say, Facebook or some of the others, because you kind of have like your own network
Bubble.
already on those ones, and you
Mm-hmm.
kind of try to branch that out. Whereas the amazing part of Twitter is it's everyone to everyone, so it's constantly shifting, constantly changing. So the name Teapot, this part of Twitter, like it's already joking around with the idea that, my part of Twitter is not the same as your part of Twitter. And also the second part of the joke is we don't really know what it is that has brought us together. Like it's quite nebulous. It's quite difficult to describe. And yeah, and this name Teapot is only the current name.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was joining, I was on Twitter. I don't know for certain when it was that I came back, but I think it was 2014 or 2015. And back then they were making the joke in group, and that was like 2015, 2016. And of course, the name in group was actually being joked about in 2020 or 2021 during
Mm-hmm.
coronavirus before Teapot became the name. And
Mm-hmm.
we kind of changed it because people weren't getting the joke. Like, because in group obviously sounds quite exclusionary, but like as you found, like the community is actually quite friendly.
Open.
Like
Yeah.
it's intimidating at first, but if you come in and you ask questions or you reply, like honestly, then people will reply to you.
Yeah.
And we follow small accounts, like that's kind of what we do. So yeah, that name, the second time in group came around, that we decided that I don't know, the crowd, the
Yeah.
collective decided that it was probably a bit too mean. So what is it? Well, for me, I feel like I'm in like a middle generation, and there's an older generation to me.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so it's interesting to be considered like the sage lady. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, it's flattering. I do like to be there. I do like to massage the vibes. I do like to try to bring knowledge and wisdom and maturity to the space.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have elders as well. So
Interesting.
the way that most people translate the history is it starts in 2008, when social media was invented. And before social media was invented, the main way that you would go online and like talk to other people was forums
Forums.
or blogs,
Blogs.
like and be in the comments of blogs. So, Reddit won the forum wars, but before then there were many forums and people would talk about certain topics. Or there were blogs, so people who were good writers would also have their favorite topics. So
Mm-hmm.
around 2008, there was like the new atheist movement, which was a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And as some of the leading people in the new atheist movement got embarrassing, some people kind of like split off. So like yeah, like Richard Dawkins started to get
Yeah.
more and more like insane sounding. And social media obviously was coming online as well. So there were certain other blogs that people kind of went to instead, and those blogs became very prominent. But also, the people writing those blogs started joining social media because the kind of elders that I consider myself to have are like early adopters. They're really into
Mm.
technology. So they had their own blogs already when that was a new medium, and yeah, they were starting with Twitter. So they all joined in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I didn't arrive on Twitter until 2015. So these blogs, I personally, well, I did go via Less Wrong somewhat. So there's the Less Wrong
Mm-hmm.
blog, the Slate Star Codex blog, and those people are known as like the rationalists or
Mm-hmm.
effectively the rats. And I like burned through that fairly fast and came upon the Meaningness blog, which is written by David Chapman. It's so helpful for someone who's like losing their faith in something systemic, let's say, or rational, or maybe ideological. So it's kind of trying to help out people who have realized that they used to be, in some sense, a true believer of a system,
Mm-hmm.
and now they have doubts. So it might be science, it might be physics, it might be math, it might be a political ideology, it might be a social movement. I mean, I was in social justice personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that blog is really excellent for when you suddenly realize that maybe it's not the complete, total, true answer to everything, and you realize that that's maybe not quite how the world works, and you need, yeah, like suddenly you need to know, how do I have nuance? How do I like get over
Yeah.
this like adherence to this one system that I've now seen has flaws. And once you admit that it has flaws, you have to kind of be like, well, which system do I choose now? Do I choose a system? Is there a life for me now? So, um, so yeah, this blog like covered that, and then there are people in the world that have like gone through that process and matured out of that process, and they have become very cool people as well, and like become the most interesting commentators and like political philosophers or just general philosophers, or I think so.
Mm-hmm.
So when I finished reading Meaningless, and these are called the post rats, the people that are like post systemic, they're called the post rats, or possibly the meta rats. I like meta rat because it kind of implies like a expand and
Mm-hmm.
include kind of move that you're doing. So I was like, okay, the Meaningless blog, I finished reading it, but it itself as a blog is not finished. So where is this guy? Oh my God, maybe he's on Twitter. So that's how I came.
Mm.
And that was 2015. And so there's people my age, people like me, who were reading this blog that all came to Twitter, and we're all talking to the
Each
author,
other.
David Chapman,
Yeah.
and we're talking to each other in his comments critically. So we became like, it's like there's like five elders that like talk to each other and all of their friends just hanging out on early
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, minding their own business. Then all of these like students of the blogs like appear. And so
Mm.
like around this like piece of grit, I shouldn't say that, but there becomes a pearl, right? There like becomes
Yeah.
like a scene. And that only gets bigger and bigger because there's really nice norms in the scene. So earnestness, like willing to discuss and debate, but not necessarily you have to win. It's more
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we're truly questing, like truly searching, truly like wondering like what is life? Like what
Yeah.
is this? Like what is this mental move that I've done? Where I used to be like beholden to an ideology or a politics or something, and now I'm not beholden to it. And so we're all making friends, and we're all like, where do we go from here? And so where you can go from there is far. You can go through spirituality, you can go to healing, you can go to ritual, you can go to magic, you can go to further philosophies, like further religions. You can look at every religion that there is in the world. You can look at every philosophy because they're not like evil to you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're just facts. So yeah, so it's a great exploratory movement, and I would say that Teapot, it itself appeared. It's a new wave, and it was because of coronavirus.
Mm.
So people were coming online in great numbers, and they were seeing that like there's this like cozy, beautiful part of Twitter, like within the hell realm of Twitter. There's this like friendly, earnest, like horny, like beautiful part of Twitter where you can talk and debate and you can have any opinion and you won't be cancelled for it because, but do you remember that? Like when
Yeah.
people were cancelled for things,
Yeah.
like yeah, I mean, it feels like that's coming to an end. Like it's already over
I
that
think.
like mood. But anyway,
Yeah.
so Teapot is like the most recent like version,
Of
and there was
that.
a lot of like concern, like will the scene collapse because it's getting too big, or people who don't understand are coming on. So we're currently seeing an evolution of can how many people can it
Mm-hmm.
hold? Like how much load bearing weight can it take?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the norms of like friendliness, playfulness, and also like apoliticalness. I think a lot of people don't understand that. Like they think that we're shit posting and edge lording, but I would say that the like we're actually not.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if you're like post ideology, you can see the positives and negatives of every single thing.
Exactly.
So you can say that Trump is an excellent tweeter because he is. He literally made some forms of tweeting that didn't exist before. And people now say the format and they don't realize where it's come from.
Yeah.
So many such cases was Trump, for example. And people say that all the time now. And then, the short, punchy, and like shame exclamation mark at the end,
Yeah.
like that was one of. So we can say that Trump is an excellent tweeter and also say that we don't agree with his policies on, I don't know, you
Yeah.
know, steel taxes to
Yeah.
China. Also, we can say he's a good leader, he's a bad leader. We can say that Obama is a good leader or a bad leader. Like we can say that Obama is warlike, or that that publicly closed Guantanamo and then secretly opened Abu Ghraib. Like so people think that, and you can joke. Then you can make memes, you
Yeah.
can make art, you can joke, you can poke at the bits that are hard to see and hard to admit and make light of, you can not make light of them, but you can be humorous about them because it's not life or death to you anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the mature side of the scene. But yeah, I think people come for like the enjoyment in whatever way, like even if it's the shit posting, and then they stay for like the other stuff.
Yeah,
So
the vibe. Yeah, I loved like this. It's like speaking with an historian of the movement. That's great. Yeah, and so
yeah.
I have so many questions about that. Because I feel like one of the things that really attracted me to the kind of people that were part of Teapot was just this openness to ideas, and it's like that curiosity is an important thing in the world, and like this openness to like actually wanting to understand the other side. And I feel like what happened a lot with social media is that people are like they're trying to find where's my tribe so I can like fit in a box, and that's it. And what I love
Yeah.
about Teapot is that it's like it's this box where you go in and there's nothing in the box. It's completely open, and you're like, okay, I'm kind of
Yeah.
part of something, but it's like I'm part of something that just sees everything as valid, and I associated that with like this extreme openness. Once again, openness and curiosity about the whole world. So that's what I love. Like as you were saying, like if you're so if you like you use, and maybe this is you don't agree with me, but like if you use like lenses as like politics as a lenses, like let me look at all of these people through politics, you'll see so many different things, but yet
Yeah.
all at the end of the day, like all of them will be, well, yeah, I'm hoping to discuss like if Trump is like a good candidate or a bad candidate, but I'm open to doing it in a very different way than what happens like online, and that's
Yeah.
something that I really enjoy. um I guess one of the follow-up questions is, you mentioned like how many people can the movement hold before it collapses, and I
Mm.
guess my question is, well, why do you think it would collapse?
Oh, well, I think because for me the transition between these things where going from like sort of, I don't know, high school to uni to college to existential crisis to well, and now like I like to now Buddhism, spirituality, or like through a lot of philosophy as well. Like that was a very long journey, and I think that only it being impossibly hard and me being insanely depressed pushed me to go to the next level and the next level and the next level.
Hmm.
So I think that if you're if you've come in because you're sort of just bored and you want something specific out of the group, you're going to bounce off of other things that are in the group unless you've done the same journey.
Hmm.
Now, it's possible to do that journey much faster than I did, I think. And I think that actually people younger than me can and do it faster, which is awesome. Um, but we are still kind of a bubble. It's people who like words, people who like writing, people who like thinking, maybe like higher IQ than is comfortable, and maybe a lower EQ than is comfortable when they're young, like the kind of people who would rather be online than go outside and make real friends. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not even a movement. It's just we came online to do the same thing, to find
Yeah.
people like us, where we were like, I'm post-political now. Like I have people today because we're currently recording during
Yeah.
the election. I have people today saying how good or bad it is that the result that we've had. And so it's like, how do you say, well, I don't really mind about the result? Like, so
Yeah.
how can you have friends that say, oh yeah, no, neither do I, or like let's debate the merits of each candidate or
Yeah.
whatever. So we came to find those friends, But I think we've attracted a lot of people that didn't come for that reason. They've attracted because we were having so much fun. So, you know, we've been shitposting, we've been memeing, like we've been talking about theory, talking about philosophy, talking about religion, talking about healing. And a lot of people have joined that have not been on that same journey. They're not the same people. So the question is just like, will they be able to tolerate us? Because if you're not post-systemic, you might not be able to tolerate us. You certainly won't be able to tolerate me. I'm going to seem like a fence sitter, like a devil's advocate, like an amoral person who never has an opinion on anything. Even though on specifics, I will have an opinion. So I guess those people will bounce off. But yeah, is there a critical mass? Like, I think maybe it's, will the norms be diluted?
Change. Yeah.
Like, will the political partisan arguing come back? Will the negative, the negative replies come back? Um, yeah, are there not enough people still on Twitter as well? Because a lot of people have left for the next new thing and the next new thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very dynamic space, and like it's okay for things to end. It's okay for things to die. I like it would be bad, I think, if it gets like gradually worse and worse and worse, and then people who remember the good times kind of hang on, but like are deluded that it's still good. I think it is still good right now, but yeah, the question is like, will new people keep joining? Will they still feel like they've finally found their
Yeah.
tribe? Who knows?
Yeah. I feel like there's an essence of, once again, warmth and openness and like fun and acceptance that I feel like, and it's kind of like those are partially the norms of Teapot. And I feel like what may happen is you get a lot of people joining the movement that actually don't. They interpret those rules in different ways until it might slowly like fade away, as you were saying. Like those
Right.
that still remember like what those norms actually mean, can always like come up with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, because that's the beauty of the internet, is not right, is that okay, today you're part of a community, and if that community fails, that's fine. You can still use the internet to connect with like-minded people, and if like-minded
Right.
people to you are like open people and fun and curious and just like these people that are interested in looking beyond like certain limits, eventually you'll
Yeah.
find them and you'll create a different thing and a different thing, right? And I think that's the beauty of having these kinds of communities online instead of just based on geography. Because if you have them
Yes.
like only physically, like if this week everyone goes away and other people come back, and that those are the only people that new people that come back, and you have them, like you either have to adapt to their own perception or in their own like a view of things, or you'll be left alone. Whereas in the internet, like, well, if these people just go away, like I can always follow new people and find a different community, right? I feel like that's the
Right.
beautiful thing of the internet.
Yeah, I feel like I should say as well that my definition of teapot is quite different to some other people's definition now. Um, yeah, many people didn't read these blogs. They didn't like they. Yeah, they were on Twitter for some other reason, but then one person kind of introduced them into the scene. And
Yeah.
for many people, it isn't about philosophy and these blogs or this journey. But I like how you said it. The openness to going beyond like the set walls
Yeah.
that we sort of get raised in almost, and just being like, wait, like what else is there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I need to say this. Like, I feel like and I've always like wondered about this in a sense. I don't think I'm kind of in the middle between teapot and not teapot. Like I know of it, and sometimes I go there and I talk with people, but I feel like I'm not, and that's okay, by the way. But I feel like I'm not like deep in the trenches. That's why like I love your overview of it, because it's like, oh, so that's what, oh, okay, so that's those people, okay, perfect. Because I feel like there was a large chunk of knowledge that I just gained because I hadn't. But yeah, it's definitely like a place that um I think it's good for you. Like I enjoy like going
Yeah.
through some of the accounts and like, let me see what these guys are saying. In a way, though, one of the things that I wanted to connect is like we're just talking about all of this being online, and yet like the whole community has found a way to actually connect offline, right? And have like these events where people just meet with each other and hang out. And once again, when I think about that, and maybe I'm wrong, but like the first person that comes to mind is you. Like I have no idea if there was one before you started to do this. Probably there was, but like in my mind, because it's just saying like you're a middle generation, I'm the youngest one, so I was like, well, Jess probably did it. And so I guess that my question would be like, how did that part started? Like, how did those events started? Tell us a little bit about that. Which are the ones that you organized? So yeah, let's have that open question.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think I am going to take credit for it a bit.
Good.
Um, yeah, well, I did. So the other huge person in the in real life world is obviously GPT Brooke, and so she does the US event, which is bigger than the European side. And me and her basically did the first ones after coronavirus at the same time because the whole world was only just starting to to unlock and yeah, like I think weirdly enough, the community was happy with like how to control coronavirus, so they weren't too bad with how soon we did everything, which was good. So her event was a weekend, just the weekend directly after mine. So it was so close, in fact, that I couldn't go to it. I wanted to relax, and I had to move house. And anyway, so yeah, where did it come from? Well, so again, it's all the how do I meet people who are like me? How do I
Mm-hmm.
meet people who can understand what I understand? And so my first event that was exclusively for Twitter was actually before coronavirus. It was in January 2020, and it was called SenseMaker Workshop. And there's still a little dead Twitter account for that. I'll have to throw up
Mm-hmm. I
the
know.
old website.
Yeah.
But yeah, I rented a pop-up shop as you can do in London. Like I just saw it's like it was an old shop for a week. I hired some furniture. Literally staple gunned some wallpaper to the walls, and I invited like philosophers to come and speak and have office hours. Actually, weirdly enough, um, so yeah, that was in 2020. And previous to that, I had lived in a really nice share house, and the share house was in a big building. It was in a warehouse. So, and previous to that, I was a social justice organizer. So I was organizing like bisexual people having meetups. I was going to conferences. I was doing feminist organizing. I was doing Pride. So yeah, we also did these parties, and because most of us were bi and polyamorous, we would just be like, okay, we live in a warehouse. It's rude not to throw parties because this, living space in London is at a premium. Like no one else can have big parties, but we've got some space. So we used to throw these parties every month for 5 years. We would take a 1 month off in the summer because everyone was at festivals anyway. But yeah, so we threw these huge, huge parties, and yeah, so when polyamorous people throw a party, like a lot of people come. So that became like quite an education in large scale organizing, how to deal with conflict, just the basic human needs that people have. Like people get hungry, like people need the toilet, like people need to sleep. People get dehydrated, like people get sick.
Mm-hmm.
So the logistics was all there. And I was also meeting people from Twitter, weirdly enough. Like in the less wrong world, they're quite connected. They've got Google, like Gmail, like message boards and things like this. So I was actively meeting people from Twitter long before
Doing these
even
events.
Corona,
Yeah.
even my event. Yeah. So, during Corona, my group house all split apart. We had already had to move out of the warehouse anyway. Then we moved countries, and so I was in Lisbon. And then, as it was looking like it was ending, I was like, "God damn, man! Like I miss my parties. I miss my warehouse parties. Like it's been a long time." So I just posted on Twitter, like, if I made a party, like, would you come? And like so many people said yes. So I was like, okay, cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to charge them a deposit that they won't get back if it doesn't happen. Because if you're willing to pay money, then you're really willing to come.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was my litmus test. And yeah, 25 people paid the deposit in like minutes. And like there were people crying on the phone to me saying that they had missed the tweet because it was during work hours.
Yeah.
And they were really upset. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, I extended it to 40 people and they sent me the money. And yeah, we had a great time. And it was like a warehouse party. It was a big stag do sort of venue. And then it was born, and yeah, people said they just got so much out of it, like, and I saw the same as when I saw with social justice organizing. What I saw was the incredible emotions you get when you finally find people who accept you in real life. And that was overwhelming, really. People were finding community, people were finding friendship, and they were like joyful and almost crying from the relief, because all their lives they had felt like the weird one,
Yeah.
and like they just were destined to never have friends, and so on. And here were these people that they just got it, they just understood,
Yeah.
and we could be friends very quickly because we already knew each other from online.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me going, I think, is just the emotions that people experience and the friendships that happen and the connections that happen after that. And like, yeah, I mean, the effective altruism people are big in the edges of TPOT, and
Mhm.
so they have this whole idea of quality adjusted life years. So like higher quality, longer life, and
Yeah.
like the quality change that these events can give to people is just huge.
Yeah.
And for me, it was easy in the sense that I've done it so much that I know what goes wrong. I know how to organize. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it started as a party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a great story. And I remember that one of the things that I remember thinking when you were setting this up, and then other people were like making their own like versions of it, and
Yeah.
it just hit me like, yeah, you know what, you can like s- arrange a venue and worry about people, and people will fly if there's a strong sense of community. People will fly all over the world just to meet with like-minded people. I think that that's so obvious right now, but seeing this
Yeah.
happening as you were setting all of these things up, as I was getting people like come from all over the world to Portugal, even if just for a couple of weeks, and I was meeting them, and I was like, man, like this is actually a possibility, and it now sounds
Yeah.
so like obvious. Like, of course, it's a possibility. Like, people have been doing it for a long, but it's like back then to me, I was like, oh my god, and like that. I feel like that opened a lot of like it literally opened my worldview to what was possible in terms of connecting with people through online, and the kinds of
Right.
commitments that you're able to do through there. And I feel like, as you were saying, like it's great because a lot of these people, maybe they were the, as you were saying, the weird ones where they're like, oh, I mean, I'm destined to not have any friends. Like, people would just won't understand me. Then they find this community online, so they're vicious online because that's where they feel like heard, and that's where they feel like people understand them. And taking it to the next level where you're like, okay, you're no longer like a pixel in my screen. You're an actual physical person that I can touch, that I can hug, that I can connect with. I mean, that has to be one of the most beautiful and fulfilling feelings that you may have, right? And yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like the community aspect is really really important and definitely strong. And I feel like you do that very well. What were some of the, like, you were saying, so okay, so let's step back. You were saying that you were throwing like these poly parties, okay? And of
Yeah.
course I want to get into the poly part, but
Yeah. Yeah.
let's first go into the party part. So
Okay.
you were saying that a lot of people were coming, and you were understanding like all of these logistical aspects of it. Can
Yeah.
you tell us like one or two stories where you were like, oh, okay, so that's a major lesson that I just learned by this happening? Like, you were mentioning like people getting irate,
Mhm.
or people like getting sick or something like that. What
Yeah.
were some of the situations that were like big lessons where you're like, okay, I can extrapolate the principle from here to apply to all of my events?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think most of them weren't super big,
Okay.
but they were each like it's all important, so it all just adds to a picture.
Mm.
Um, one thing I will mention right at the beginning, that never happened is we never had a fire.
Okay.
And that's because I was obsessed with not having a fire. I was the fire queen. People were very upset with me when I told them that they couldn't put their bags here and they couldn't
Mm.
have candles and things like this. But yeah, I was actually trained as a public library manager. So kind of like a librarian, how you imagine what a librarian is. And I was responsible for a building, so I did risk assessments. So every time there was a warehouse fire in San Francisco or Poland or whatever, people would phone us up and be like, "Oh my God, have you done fire regulations?" And I was like, "Yeah, luckily 3 years ago I did do the
Yeah.
fire regulations. Thank you." So there's that. So you want to never, ever, ever have a fire,
Yeah.
and that one is not intuitive. So you have to do it counterintuitively, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Everything else is easy. Like, yeah. So the other things were, I was just noticing my own self. So we told people to like bring drinks, and then we would tell them to like bring pizza, I think.
Mm.
And one thing that I noticed was that most people didn't really like they didn't really eat the pizzas. But at a certain time of night, it was like 2, 3 a.m., they would start eating the pizzas, or they would start cooking the pizzas, and like you could barely get it out of the oven before it's gone, and then there's the
Yeah.
next pizza would go in, and so you're just constantly. So yeah, there's a certain point of an evening that people get hungry, and it's because they're staying awake longer than they should.
Yeah.
So or longer than they usually do. So the only way to stay awake is to like keep eating. So that was interesting. So after I noticed that, I was like, oh, bring pizza. Like I was very clear. Like whereas before people would bring a pizza or two and they would get cooked, or maybe they would use ours because we always said you can have anything out of the fridge or whatever. So I think that would became more specific where we were like, bring food and
Yeah.
pizza specifically because it's easy to cook. So that was, one of the things where I was like, right, people's needs. There was another thing where we only had 2 toilets and there were 100 people in the building. So there was always long queues for the toilet.
I
And that
imagine.
was something I worried about a lot. In the end, I didn't need to too much because people told me that they got together with their like husband or their wife because they were standing next to each other in the queue for the toilet.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's super cute. But I think I will say the most salacious thing. I mean, it's the best story and it's the most salacious, but it's not that deliberate. One of the things that happened early on was that this was a huge space that like 100 people would come, and around 15 or 20 people would stay over. And one of the places they would stay is our big upstairs lounge. It was heated. It was like a big open plan space, and there were couches and there was blankets and all kinds of things. So there were 10 or 12 people trying to sleep in the lounge, and there was this one couple that were doing drugs and getting very frisky with each other, and everyone was too British to say like, "Hey, like shut up, we're trying to sleep." Like take it somewhere else. And they said that they were disturbed all night by this like one couple that were getting frisky with each
That's
other.
some stamina.
So we were like, okay, yeah, that's bad. Like that's the main sleeping area in the winter because it's got
It's cold.
heating.
Yeah.
So we can't have people doing that. So I know, bright idea. What we'll do is we'll designate a small room or an area somewhere like that's not heated or whatever. We'll designate this area as the place where you go if that's what you're doing.
Looking for. Yeah.
So that the people sleeping can say, hey, take it to the room, like get
Yeah.
a room,
Yeah.
like go away, leave us alone. And this was like for them, like this genuinely, like we didn't realize how this would snowball. But basically, the next party where we said like, if you're gonna get frisky, do it in this room. Like blessings on it. We're bisexual, we're polyamorous, like we get
Yeah.
it. But do it in this room. And so immediately the rumor started. There's a sex room. And so yeah, like oh my God, like we couldn't like then we couldn't then control the wildfire because then
Yeah.
people just started saying it was a sex party
Yeah.
forever after that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, it's fine. It wasn't a sex party. There was a dance floor, a smoking room, a chill out room, a lounge, like
Yeah.
everyone's bedrooms. Like there was no sex. People would have like a craft beer and a conversation and they would leave. But like there was a sex room, and that sex room had to get bigger and bigger. And yeah, it became known as a sex party, even
Yeah.
though it really wasn't. Like only a few people would do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you build it, they will come, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, once you like provide a thing, it becomes like kind of famous.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had to have rules. We had to do mediation because people started accusing each other of being unsafe.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Like you mentioned, like dealing with conflict, like because I feel like in an environment where you're like in a sense making weekend, let's call it that. Like I feel like a lot of people that are coming in, they're coming in with a certain openness, and maybe the overall vibe is different from a party. And like, and
Yeah.
when you're mentioning conflict, I was like, okay, so like, what can you tell us, like, a little bit, can you help me understand, like, how did you learn how to deal with conflict? Because I feel like once you're organizing an event, and I don't want this podcast to be just about events, but like, you're very good at it, so I'm picking your brain. Like, when you're doing an
Yeah.
event where people are going to have access to alcohol or drugs or like whatever it is, the tendency for like some kind of conflict to happen, if you're not filtering extremely well the people that are in there, just it keeps increasing, right? And I was a musician for a while. I played in a lot of bars and a lot of cafes and places, and like, that's a context where you see, like, it's way easy to just start a fight in a bar and then end up at
Right.
the police department or something like that. And so I guess my question was, what were the your what's your approach to make sure that conflict doesn't happen, or if it happened, like, how were you dealing with that?
Yeah, we actually did lots of different things. So we borrowed from different communities that had already done it.
Mm,
So I would definitely like always, ask other people for advice or just say, how do you deal with it in yours? So we had tons of different stuff. So
mm,
like we would always say to people for a start, like the warehouse itself was an overwhelming environment, and that you don't need drugs or alcohol at all
yeah,
at this place.
yeah,
It's already a big deal. There's 100 people, it's noisy, there's music, like there's expectations that you're bringing. And so we were like, look, just consider like not having anything. Like just, yeah, take it really slowly, really lightly. And so we put that message forth quite strongly as well, where it's
yeah.
like, look, we're not into this. Another thing we did was, which was totally copied from another, I believe it was a kink event officially, but I can't remember which one it was. They had a system whereby you had to be buddied up. Your guests have to be buddied up. So if one person is having an issue, the buddy is the one that comes and deals with it.
Mm,
And if someone is behaving badly, then you and the buddy both leave. So you've got to be willing to be tied. Your reputation is tied to their reputation,
interesting.
which means that people tend to bring people who are not going to like cause
Yeah,
conflict.
that's very smart.
And yeah, yeah. And it meant that people could bring people we didn't know, because we would just invite like the people we knew. But how do you get new people in? Because I was always interested in having like fresh faces in the crowd and
Yeah.
everything. So that's a method to bring people that you know. Weirdly, a side effect of that was that there were too many women. We had more women than men. Maybe because it was a queer space as well. So I think that people didn't trust their male friends to not just put their foot in it with queer
Yeah.
issues. So we had this unusual problem of being like known as a sex party, and we didn't have enough guys. So yeah, I hope to have that problem again.
Yeah.
And then I can make Teapot and this group like come together. But yeah, so there's that. So you will both lose access to the party.
Yeah.
So that really, really helps. Well, but we almost never needed to use that. Like normally it was people who were just a bit drunk and they were
Yeah.
being sick. And so it's like, right, your buddy can help with this. Like
Yeah.
we're not helping with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was good. If conflict happened at the time, like basically, I think that almost never happened.
Mm,
But if someone was being aggro, we would just throw them out because we could say, look, it's our house, our rules. Like
yeah.
there are no actual rules.
Yeah.
There's no fairness in this. We live here. This is our home. If we are doing something we don't like, you just get to go. We don't even care whether
Yeah.
it was you who started it, them who started it. We don't care. You're just
Yeah.
out. And normally, if the other person started it as well, they were out too.
Mm,
It's like everyone
yeah.
goes because it's like, yeah, don't be aggro, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But
there was that.
the oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, there was just the main thing that we did was we actually investigated accusations that came after the fact.
Mm,
And a lot of people actually don't do that because it takes a lot of effort. But I think because we were known to actually go and ask everyone involved, like, what happened? Like, what's your side? What's your side? And then we would make a decision. Um, People realized that we were actually going to check.
mm,
And like we were serious about our rules and we were serious about following up on those rules.
yeah.
And so they couldn't just like tell a story and then get the other person banned and no one would like not no one would investigate. Like we
Yeah.
actually investigated.
Yeah.
And so people were actually on their absolute best behavior with us all the time because they
That's
didn't want
awesome.
to lose access to the
Yeah.
parties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's great. Let me ask you. I have two questions that I want to take away from you. The first one is, um, like when you're planning something like this, either like jazz camp or these parties or whatever events it is, like you end up having to. There's this. You're organizing it, and so you're in the role of the organizer, not so much like actually enjoying the whole thing. Like,
Right.
how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it is very difficult to enjoy your own stuff. I guess I can just say I've done it for years, not enjoying it, and then um yeah, so basically if you're Buddhist it helps. So like enjoying the moments that you do get to enjoy is really
Yeah,
good. I lean heavily on a volunteer team, and next year they're actually going to be paid, which is great.
awesome.
So yeah, I'll actually have be like, and I'll be like, look, I'm not even like, I'm not on right now.
Mm.
Like you're in charge. And so there's actually a person who's like my second in command, if you like, and like she has the skills, in my opinion, to do whatever I would do. So to just like make the decision.
Yeah,
So having a second in command is great, and telling them that you're going to be off, and they will tell you I'm off now, and so
yeah,
you
yeah.
kind of like
Balance
swap
between.
shifts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's a lot you can do before the event, and then the event runs, and normally when the event's running, like nothing that bad is
Mm-hmm.
happening. You only then have to deal with problems as they arise, which is quite nice. And then yeah, just like build in time off and say you want to do this or that, or like yeah, have people around you that can deal with things on their own.
Yeah.
I try never to be the bottleneck for anything. So never be the bottleneck for information, never be the bottleneck for keys, never be the bottleneck for the phone number for the emergency services or for the property owner or something like that. So I try to make all the information public so that if I'm asleep or I'm not around, like anyone can fix the problem for themselves as long as
Mm-hmm.
they have enough agency to do so.
Yeah.
So that really helps too. And yeah, I also like make it clear with the crowd, like this is our event. We're co-creating this event. And people the first time felt that that was excellent. They felt empowered to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I'll tell them like, here's the fire rules, here's the rules of the venue, but otherwise, like, let's go, and like,
Yeah.
here's the stuff. So yeah, I believe in enabling people. So just simple things like this is where the bin is. This is when you have empty the bin. Like this is where the food is. Like this is where the keys are. Like this
Yeah.
is where this is. Um, yeah, so just get people to help you basically, and they will. Like yeah, if there's 100 people all helping you to do something, it's effortless.
Yeah.
So yeah.
People are coming to this episode to learn more about TPOT and are leaving with like a master class on how to run an event. So thank you, Jess. Okay, so enough with events. Let me ask you something. What is it about you that makes you interested in scenes? So, like all the things that we talked about, like you were in this like quest to find people like yourself, but also like when you were talking about the party, you were saying like, oh, I was always interested in having like new faces. So it's not so much about finding a group and keep it. It's about like building a scene. What do you think about you that? What do you think is about you that makes you interested in this?
That's such a good question. I don't know. I feel like that's the secret sauce.
Mm.
Like, yeah. There's a few interfacing things. Like I've always like weirdly, this is in my astrology as well, which I only recently got into. But I've always felt that I wanted to fight for the underdog, for example. Like I don't like seeing people like marginalized for something that they don't deserve. Um, and it's almost certainly my own like childhood trauma type stuff. I was different in like a few ways. And so, but luckily one of them was super tangible. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, so
Mm.
that made me like prime for like not quite bullying, but just ignoring. So I didn't really have friends growing up in school, like not until I was about 15 or so, 14 or 15 at school. So I was always like left out and treated badly, and picked last on the team and all of this
Yeah.
stuff. So I felt the pain of that. And that was imposed just arbitrarily, really. Like my parents were in this religion. I didn't choose it. But it had all these like outward facing consequences because they're very what's known as isolationist. So they don't let their kids go to school even, but when they are at school, they're not allowed to do certain things. So it was very public
Mm-hmm.
that I was different. And luckily, that was something that was so public, I could rebel against it. So I like learned how to be a rebel, how to get out of it, how to get away from it, how to act cool. Because I realized if you're at the bottom of the social hierarchy, there's no further you can fall, so you can just do what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I became the rebel. Like, I kind of like jumped the horseshoe, and became the coolest kid in school for a bit. So I realized the power that's down there, I guess. Yeah, so I want other people to realize it too. That actually like being in the weakest position is also the strongest position. So yeah, and I
That's
like to
beautiful.
defend people. I like to look after people. Yeah, and like for a long time, I got no joy out of helping people. So I don't know why I was doing it.
I'm going
It's
to clip
crazy.
that. I'm going to clip that, and we'll put it on Twitter.
Yeah, you definitely should.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I don't know why. I had low affect, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, something about it, like yeah, I've always wanted to like help other people out and have friends myself. Like I want to be with people. I was chronically not with people for the first like 15 years of my life,
Yeah.
and yeah, found communities that accepted me. But that was almost again arbitrary, like based on like a characteristic of mine. Like, yeah, I'm bi, or I came out as bi in my
Mm.
like mid 20s, so I could use that as a way to meet people. But lots of people don't have that. They don't have something tangible to find a niche community
Yeah.
in. And they don't have something to rebel against. They don't have an obviously bad religious childhood thing or whatever. So they're just sort of floating and lost. So yeah, uh, I sympathize with all of that, and yeah, I want my people, and yeah, I want other people to find their people too.
Yeah. First of all, that's a great answer, and it's one of those things that I feel like whenever I meet someone that I really enjoy, like which is your case, like I feel like there's always like this um story of some very bad shit happened, or I was like in these dark places and now I'm here, and like and
Right.
I'm a sucker for that. Like and I feel like, and maybe it's because maybe I was that person as well, but it's like I have this bias where I truly think that the people that are like change makers, they go through that process, and then you can
Yeah.
just feel it, and I feel like that's why maybe a lot of people like turn to jazz camp and to these events, and turn to you, because like there's a lot of people on TPOT that I've met that I really enjoy, but their vibe is slightly different. And I don't mean this as like an offense to anyone, but it's just I remember that the first time that we had a coffee, I immediately I was like, I like this person. I don't know why, but I
Mm.
like this person, and I feel like you carry that vibe, and
Yeah.
and yeah, like trying to do that for other people, I feel like it's such a good thing, and trying to help people like you know have the communities where like, well, if you went through some bad shit and you're like trying to come out of it stronger, like maybe you can find here a community that will help you to do that. I
Yeah.
feel like that's beautiful. um you mentioned religion, like being raised in as a Jehovah Witness, and you also mentioned Buddhism. You also mentioned a lot of like meditation on Twitter. So I guess the question is like, what's your relationship with religion nowadays?
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely changed. So yeah, being raised in the Jehovah Witness thing was terrible. Horrible as a kid. So I tried to, yeah, be as far away from it as possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, became an atheist for a while, and um, yeah, kind of just scientist, materialist, atheist, like fully, because it was clearly rubbish, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, after years and years and years of that, like from probably age 19 to, well, 29 was when I kind of lost faith in the social justice stuff that I was doing. I was
Mm.
I was 29. And then I was like, oh, like how do I see the world if it's not through the lens of this very particular ideology? And that took many years of like soul searching just to even think about that.
Why did you lose faith in the
Um,
first place? Sorry, in the social justice movement.
the social justice, It was actually very specific. Somebody challenged me to articulate the views of the other side, without without them knowing that I wasn't from their side. So it's called the ideological Turing test.
Mm.
So the Turing test is, can a computer seem like a human?
Mm-hmm.
The ideological version is, can you seem like you're one of their tribe? So I had to, yeah, and luckily I'm smart enough to articulate the other side. But the caveat of they have to not know that you're not one of them meant that I had to put it in terms that they would
Understand.
believe.
Yeah.
So my side would have called them evil, or like cold, or unfeeling or something. Whereas when I had to articulate their views, I wasn't allowed to do that. So I had to be like, oh, they care about the economy, and that's important. And if some people get like lose out because of policy change, that doesn't matter because there's the greater good to think of. And yeah, so I managed to like articulate the other side somewhat,
Yeah.
and then it just suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, they're not evil. um they're just normal people that have different beliefs to me. um and yeah, like I just started to see like all of the structure of how each side keeps the good opinions of the other side away.
Mm.
And more than that, I even saw that the basic principles that each side is founded on are almost arbitrarily chosen. Like they're not good or bad. So like let's say so social justice is kind of a lot about caring and about human dignity, and everyone deserves a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of like more right wing side of that is more like fair pay for fair work, like a kind of like strict meritocracy. They believe in, like, I don't know, let's say the family, or
Mm-hmm.
like society not being threatened, like society is really important, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like all of those things are good things. They're all good things. And I realized, oh shit, like they're all good things. They're not even opposite things. They're just different
Jason. Yeah.
things. And so the ideologies get built on top of them, but which ones you started with is kind of just based on like what your experiences have been, or which one you like the most, or which ones your parents say are the most important, or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, they are not. Like all of those things are good and important, and like some people just highlight some more than others. And yeah, and I also noticed, so the rationalists love to measure everything and the feminists don't measure everything. So something that really appealed me was that rationalists had discovered that racism training doesn't work, and it actually makes you very slightly more racist,
Mm.
if anything. And I was like, oh my God, like the social justice movement definitely didn't check. They just assumed that it would work.
Yeah.
They just prescribed these solutions without checking that they even were good solutions. And I was like, wow, that's a huge blind spot. So yeah, I took many years to kind of unpick
Okay.
like what had happened.
Yeah. Got it. So sorry. Back to the religion part. You were saying
So
like,
back to the religion thing.
yeah.
Yeah, like a side track as well is trying to find the meaning of life, I suppose, is the only way to call it. Where it's like, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to care about? I think I had pretty low affect because the Jehovah's Witnesses ban everything. So I couldn't really just do what I liked or do what I wanted. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I wanted. Like nothing felt good. Nothing felt nice. Nothing felt worthwhile more than any other thing. Or there's like millions of worthwhile things. So how do you choose? Um, so that was like a weird like itch in me for a very long time. And so at uni I started reading philosophy and carried on reading philosophy. And then, yeah, the blogosphere also has lots of philosophy in it. And meaningness was the nearest thing to being like, this is how you have something meaningful that's not based on an ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So I read all of that. But I still couldn't stop there. And like, yeah, eventually I just, everything felt thin and grey and boring, and I just still didn't. I was just completely frustrated. And so I feel like there is a pipeline to go from like philosophy to spirituality. Um, or maybe people do it earlier, but then they still have to come back to it in a mature way, I
Yeah.
think. Anyway, I actually had a sort of a very strange like supernatural experience, which I won't go into because it's a bit long. But the message that I got from that supernatural experience was you have to admit you're spiritual. And I was like, oh my God, no. Like, really? I really didn't want that to be the case. I was still very atheist, just like, oh no. But I knew that it was probably true. Um, God. So yeah, so I got into meditation and Buddhism because it's like the opposite. It feels like the opposite of Christianity.
Mm,
That you don't have to believe in a God. The Buddha was just a man. And he does just say like, and a lot of his stuff is just like you can check for yourself.
yeah.
Like you don't have to believe me. In fact, don't believe me. That will only be bad. You need to sit and pay attention to how things are for you as you sit there getting bored or angry or whatever, and you've got to see what the truth is for yourself. But like all I can tell you is I sat there for a really long time and there are truths to be gained. And one of his truths is there is suffering, which is quite cool.
Hmm.
Like when I actually really fully appreciated that, yeah, the Four Noble Truths are like there is suffering. That's the first truth.
Hmm.
Which is cool. Like nobody says that. Everyone's like trying to push that under the rug. So I liked that. And then there, he also says like suffering is caused by X, and it's translated as clinging. And he said there is a way out. Sorry, the second one is there is a way out of suffering. And I was like, fuck, great. And he said it's caused by X, and the way to stop this cause that's occurring is to follow the Dharma, like
Yeah.
follow the teachings. So I was like, well, fine, let's go. And if it hadn't been that I'd already explored everything else, I wouldn't have done it for
Mm.
sure. It was my last resort, last resort. But yeah, I've been doing that for about 4 years now, and now I would also say that I'm a Christian again, in the sense that a Buddhist, the definition of Buddhist is a follower of the teachings of Buddha.
Mm.
So I would also call myself a follower of the teachings of Christ.
Right.
So yeah, I like the Gospels. I like his teachings, and I just ignore everything else,
Yeah.
like anything that's around it, any of the treatises, like anything, any of the religion. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
But like Jesus or the spirit of Jesus, I like quite a lot. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't see them as in competition either. I see them as like the same thing. They're both pointing at the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a previous episode with Jonas, and Jonas is like he was a philosopher graduate in, and he's an actor, and he does all of these different things. And we were talking precisely about that, about the relationship between your capacity to find God, whatever God means to you, in the teachings of like everyone, instead of being confined by
Mm.
just this book or this idea, or like I don't know, this prayer or something. And and we're discussing that, and I feel like that's one of the most um like it's one of the most interesting things that you can do, like being open to finding whatever you find like divine into whatever
Mm.
you're like exploring. And that might be a book, that might be an experience, that might be a person. And curiously enough, like I don't know why, but I feel like there's this very um like strong connection that happens a lot, where people like start from Christianity and then go into Buddhism, and then they try to
Mm.
harmonize both of them, or vice versa, where they start with Buddhism, then they go to Christianity, then they start to harmonize. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's and once again, like it's in that harmonization that I feel like it's the spiritual path, where, and it's just once again not just about Christianity or Buddhism, like just around this idea of, well, what's the meaning of life, or where's the divine, or like let me try and
Yeah.
pursue the good, the truth, and the beautiful. And I feel like, call it whatever you want, but like finding that path, like, okay, so this is what we're doing now. I feel like once you're in there, I don't know, it's like there's a, at least to me, there's a calm that comes from knowing that, okay, this is the path. I have no idea where the fuck this leads, but like I'm in the right path. Now I just need to keep finding a way to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And it hasn't felt like a path for most of this,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I definitely denied the divine probably as hard as anyone, probably as hard as it's possible to do.
Hmm.
Um, which is why it was so
It's the last
grey
thing. Yeah.
and awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, and in a way, I still feel like a beginner. I still feel like I don't actually know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't know what spirituality means. Like, I don't know what the divine is.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
that's why I usually say like God, whatever that means to you. Like I have no idea. Like it's
yeah,
in my view, I don't think that it's like this old man with the beard, white beard, like in robes or something like that. I don't think that that is. But like I don't know.
yeah.
I have no clue. Another thing that I have no clue about is Polly. And so
Okay.
on that smooth transition, like I that was so I'm just going to admit here, like I had no idea that polyamorous was a thing until I got into Twitter. Okay, and then I
Okay.
realized, okay, so that's a thing, and then suddenly I realized, oh, that's a whole community,
Yeah.
and I feel like ever since I got there, so 2019, 2020, like in my view, and maybe this is just because of bias and proximity bias, but it's like I feel like the movement in or I don't know if it's a movement or not, but like the scene just really grew, and I would love to understand it a little bit more. And so what I mean by understand it is, okay, so let's start with the basics. Let's say that someone is listening to this and they have no idea what being polyamorous is. I find that hard, but let's assume that there's someone in there. Like, how would you describe it?
Well, I would describe it as so another phrase for polyamorous is ethically non-monogamous. So, poly means many and amorous means loves. So it just means that you have many loves in your life, and like typically that means like more than one romantic partner, basically.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of people that would say, well, but that's not how it works. And so I would love to understand. I mean, what I mean by not aware is like, oh, you need to have someone like it's that person. You connect with that person. That's it. Like that's cheating. That's like you're normalizing cheating, whatever it is. Like all of these arguments, and I would
Oh,
love to get a perspective of like how you as a poly would like try to explain to these individuals like, but don't you feel jealous? Isn't that wrong? Like all of these moral judgments, and I would love to get your perspective on it.
yeah, sure. So it's not cheating because everyone knows. That's where the ethical side of it comes from. It's actually very spicy to talk about like actually cheating or like someone doesn't know or something like that. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so there's still spice, but no. So it's different from cheating in that in theory everybody knows and consents to that before they join the relationship, and yeah, so everyone's aware of what's going on. It is very different to how we've all been like raised
Mm-hmm.
and like told to be. I think some people think it's like completely inherent that it's like genetic or something. Um, but like I think polyamorous people disagree. That actually it's very strongly socialized, like very, very strongly. Obviously, every single cartoon, every love movie, like every plot of almost every movie has like, has she or hasn't she cheated, or will they get together, won't they get together, this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since you were born, it's been there. But yeah, polyamorous people just take the view that that like love exists and is abundant, and romantic love like isn't necessarily that different to other kinds of love, because basically we all have love in our life, and all the other kinds of love are allowed to be multiple, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like if you have like you're allowed to love both your parents, and if you love one of them, that doesn't mean that you love the other one less. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a finite resource that gets used up. So like, oh, you can only love your dad 30 points today, and because you loved your mum 70 points yesterday. Like that's not how it works. And same with like siblings, cousins, like
Friends.
obviously if you have five brothers and sisters, like you love them all, and you might love them differently, but like you still
Love them.
love them.
Mm.
And there's no lack of love inside your body for if you have like six siblings than if you have only one or none. And the same with friends. Like you can love friends, and you can have more than one like friend.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, the notion is that. you can love more than one person um, that doesn't fit into those other categories, right? Like they are something to you, but they are not your family and they're not your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's kind of interesting is that when you become polyamorous and you be it for a while, you realize that yeah, if you haven't got people in categories in quite that way, you realize that like your whole life is just relationships with other people, and you love or don't love them in different amounts, and you commit to them in different amounts, and you agree certain things that will prove your trust with each other. And you know, these kinds of things happen with all relationships, and they happen in friendships and everything else. So yeah, like sexual fidelity is considered to be a very costly signal of like trust or
Mm-hmm.
faithfulness. And so that's been used for as a proxy for romantic trust. But polyamorous people just have decided that that's not what they're gonna do. So they have to make up their own rules for like what counts as betrayal, what counts as trust. Um, and so like yeah, cheating obviously is a big deal in monogamy,
Mm-hmm.
because it is, yeah, like I say, it is this proxy for fidelity, but it is a proxy. It's not actually the faithfulness itself.
Mm-hmm.
So monogamous relationships, for example, have a lot of cheating in them and a lot of forgiveness as well. Like a lot of marriages have cheating and then they also have forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not even about the cheating, it's about something else. So the reason why you're able to forgive is because it's about some issue that the relationship has. And the cheating is a way to signal the
Hey,
pain of that
something's wrong.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so polyamorous people have the big task of like, how do I like do this in normal life? And yeah, and you have to kind of unlearn a whole bunch of social things. Um, but I think focusing on the love is the way forward. Because one of the, like there's this cool book called The Ethical Slut. That's one that I read, and they focus on like the selfishness or selflessness of your relationship with someone. So if you love someone, if you truly love someone, like how do you want them to be? Like what do you want for them? Like you want them to be healthy, happy, flourishing, and you know, on the slightly extremer end, like if that means that being with you doesn't make them happy anymore, you can't deny that they should probably break up with you and go and do something else that makes
Mm-hmm.
them happy. Because if that's what love is, and I think that is what love is, like you care about their well-being. So it's going to be painful, but like you want them to be happy in whatever they're doing. So holding on to that, the selfless side of love, I think is really important. So monogamy has a lot of like possession, jealousy. You even use jealousy to show how much you care about the person.
Mm-hmm.
So polyamorous people have to like stop doing that. So yeah, you stop considering people like yours and yours alone, and like kind of your property. But like there's good and bad ways that
Yeah.
that can play out. You know, like I say, like jealousy can be very destructive, but it can also be a strong signal of continued faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine. But yeah, polyamorous people have just decided not that. Partly because they want to love many people, and sometimes because they want to have sex with many people.
Yeah.
And for me, it was actually sexuality. I wanted to explore my bi side, but I still loved my partner and I was still dedicated to my partner. So I wanted to find a way to like still be with him, but then also like explore this other side of me that I thought
Mm-hmm.
was there, but I hadn't ever had a chance to explore. So that's how I started.
Yeah. So, and of course, I want to keep this conversation in like at the superficial level, quote unquote. I don't want to explore your own personal life, of course. Like, help me understand, like in terms of, as you were saying, like poly people need to find like these different rules to navigate the relationship, whereas like in monogamy, it's easy. Like it's almost like it's textbook. Everyone knows what's that supposed to look
Yeah.
like you in poly, like you need to be constantly, I assume, being exploring the boundaries of what a relationship looks like. Can you give me an example like of some rules or some principles that you end up like bringing to one of these relationships?
Yeah. So some rules that you try and do don't work very well. Like, don't fall in love with someone else. Like, that's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. But people normally, when they're starting out, they actually have that as a rule, which is interesting. Um, in my experience, that doesn't work. You need to like let them be who they are
Yeah.
and love whoever they want to love. Um, Something that's very common, for example, is like how you live. Like, so if you share a bed with someone, you might ask them not to have sex with someone else in your bed.
Mm.
That's kind of common. And then, yeah, I mean, I would advise that you actually don't have the same bedroom as your partner, because as soon as you start having sex with other people, you realize like you need to have a bed to go to and not be like a teenager, like running around always asking to go to their house or whatever. So generally, polyamorous people end up with their own bedrooms, and their own beds, just
Hmm.
so that clashes don't happen. Um, yeah, like I think sometimes there's like you kind of get good at like making dates and then being beholden to them. So if you've arranged to be with someone else, you go and be with someone else. And so if another partner is suddenly like, "Oh no, like I feel sad today," it's like, "Well, sorry, like that's kind of up to you." Yeah, like I've made a pre-commitment with this other person, and so you honor your commitments
Mm.
basically. So yeah, it can just be times and days and places. In fact, a lot of polyamory comes down to calendars in the end, um, because you realize that the constraint isn't love; it's actually time,
Mm.
that we're all constrained by. So that's why you only have 3 or 4 friends instead of 1,000,
Yeah.
and so on. Yeah, so they tend to be quite practical in the end. Because yeah, you're having to like check in with every single thing. Like, can I do this? Can I do that? Can it be on this day? Like, can I go to this place? Like, yeah, what do you do with Christmas, with Valentine's Day, with birthdays? Like,
Yeah.
do you meet the other person? Do you not meet the other person? So you have to like go through all of these one by one and figure them all out. But honestly, you have to do it in monogamy too. Like, some people think that blowjobs aren't cheating, and other people think that like looking at someone or giving them a kiss on the
It's
cheek is
cheating.
cheating.
Yeah.
So you have to you actually have to like come across these boundaries in monogamy as well, where you're like, no, that counts as cheating
Yeah.
actually, or not coming to my birthday counts as not caring about me, or not meeting my family counts as not caring. Like, there's so many issues, like family, children, yeah, holidays, like, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that monogamous people do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's
That.
just on overdrive when you're poly.
Yeah. No. No, I totally agree, and I feel like so I'm not poly, but one of the things that I've when I started to hear about this, I was like, okay, I want to know about it, so let me go in and understand. And I remember like one of the things that really struck me, I was like, okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Like the whole aspect of like you love a lot of people in different ways, but also the aspect of it's not love that's the problem, it's time, because
Yeah.
you may have infinite love but you don't have infinite time, so at the end you need to pick that one. Like really made me think of, okay, so this is definitely something that um I resonate with, where I'm like, I want to, like, how do I want to use my time? Do I want to spend it all with this person? Do I want to spend it with all of these different persons? And that to me clarified this idea of, okay, now I like in my own life, I want to spend as much time possible with this specific person. But
Mm.
one of the things that I really like, as I was going through the book, I don't remember the name of the book, but one of the things that I really was enjoying is like, okay, so there's, I feel like people that are in a monogamous relationship slack off on communication, whereas
Yeah.
poly people are like on top of it. Like it's like
Yeah.
it's the number one thing. I mean, not the number one thing, but it's like it's really really important. Whereas, and I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of people in monogamous relationships, they just assume that we don't need to talk about all of these different things because it's written down, like it's just like a regular day, when it's not. Like you need to develop the capacity of going through, like, well, okay, so is me not going to your birthday thing that signals that I don't care about you? Because that's a
Mm.
conversation that we need to have, right? Or is, like, I don't know, a gazillion things that may happen in a relationship, and like that was one of the things where I read the book, and by the end I was, one of the things I was thinking about is, okay, regardless of me being poly or not, I don't think that I am, but regardless of that, like there's definitely a very important lesson here, which is like, if you're having a relationship with someone, no matter the type, like you need to be on top of the communication to make sure that that
Yeah.
works out. And that's definitely something that I, because I can only imagine what it's like to be because it has to be like pretty demanding in a way, because you're always trying to, you always, I assume you always need to bring like this um rawness to the communication, and this like importance to all of that, right? And yeah, I feel like that's definitely something that poly people do way better than monogamous people.
Yeah, yeah. It does get a bit easier because as you sort of settle into a relationship, you've built trust, you can trust each other. And so rather than having to go through every single thing, it's just like whatever else you haven't gone through yet, or like just day-to-day things. And so it becomes more like just a little check-in, like it's
Yeah,
just a 5 minute thing, like or a quick like text, like, oh, I suddenly realized I'm gonna do a date, but it's a different thing to how we normally do it. So like, is this okay? And yeah, and then I'll just be like, oh yeah or no, like whatever it is, and or like do it this time and we'll talk later. And yeah, so it's like it can be very quick,
yeah,
eventually.
yeah,
But yeah, oh my God, like at the beginning of it being poly, and then also at the beginning of a new relationship, like it's
yeah,
yeah, it can be a lot. You're right though. It's absolutely like amazing. It's absolutely critical to do all that, and it does mean your relationships are very intimate, very vulnerable, as you say, and so
yeah.
that's cool. And yeah, it benefits even if you only have one relationship, it benefits it. And I think that that's one of the features of of long-term marriages
Mm,
actually, is that they have some way to always come back to the communication.
mm,
Even if you have a big fight, even if it's terrible, even if there's years where it's a bad marriage, like eventually you find a way to like talk to each other again, be honest again. And like sometimes that's when the marriage is about to fail, where it's like, well, there's nothing to lose now. Like, why don't you just say what you really think?
mm,
And so you almost break up, and but because you're at that last minute moment, you can finally say your truth. And so if you can build trust between you, that you can always say what is on your mind without the other person just jumping on it, whether that be to criticize or even to fix.
mm-hmm.
um you get to say you, and you get to be you, and then you move forward together like as a team
Yeah,
basically. So you see that in really successful monogamous marriages, I think.
yeah,
And yeah, it's like a part of monogamy that isn't being taught properly, which is like mature monogamy, I would say, like mature relationships.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that we, because I like, if we have most of the examples in like our society of couples being like monogamous, I still believe like we're not being taught that part of like a mature monogamy. Is like, okay, so everyone knows that, okay, you get married and all of that, but like okay, so but how do you go from like meeting someone and then actually having like a 50-year-old relationship with them that actually works? And it's interesting because you were mentioning like maybe you're talking like the marriage is falling apart, and in that moment it's when you're actually able to communicate and fix things and move forward better. And that reminded me of your sentence a couple of minutes ago when you said, well, the weakest position is the strongest one, right? There's nothing to lose, so
Mm.
I might as well just communicate whatever it is and let you know, like, this is how I feel, this is what I want to do. And then once that's done, maybe you can build something on top of that. uh well, Jess, this was amazing. I really, really enjoy it. Let me ask you something. If people want to connect with you, if people want to know more about you, what you're doing, about your events, what are the best places to do so?
Well, I've talked a lot about Twitter, so it's obviously on Twitter. I don't know if it will be visible on the podcast, but my at is frideswyth, so I talked about it.
Yeah,
So it's FRIDESWYTH.
yeah.
And if you put that into Twitter, you should be able to find me. I don't know if I'll reply to random DM, but I might do. Also, I started a website called Chaleira, which means
We didn't
teapot
even
in
talk
Portuguese.
about that.
Yeah.
Oh God,
We did it, but it's okay. No, no, no. Yeah, so that's a nice. But actually, the URL isn't that. The URL is teapot, TPOT dot website. So literally like teapot dot website. So you'll find that there. I actually just posted how to run an event as a whole blog post.
awesome.
So if anyone wanted even more information about that,
Yeah,
that's up at the moment. So yeah, come hang out with us on Twitter.
Absolutely. We'll leave the descriptions on the links in the description. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite like the full editing team of the Chaleira, and we're going to do like a fully episode dedicated to that. Because I feel
Oh,
so
thank
bad forgetting. Because I was so like, it was, literally my notes are Chaleira like all over the place, and I was like, no, but
yeah,
I completely forgot about it. So we'll do an extra episode with everyone from the team, and that way
of
we'll be
course.
able to talk about it. Yeah, well, Jess, this was amazing. Thank you so much. If you
Yeah,
enjoyed this conversation with Jess, just go follow her. She's amazing. Go check Shaleda and wait for the episode with everyone else from the team because we'll definitely do it. And if you enjoy Limbo, the podcast, leave us a review in your favorite podcast platform. That being said, bye bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Jess.